I think we're all a bit wary of indie platformers at this point. The barrier for entry is so low and interest was previously so high that the market is swamped with games which can be knocked out in a few months with a game maker. So what we need to ask of Disorder is whether it does anything new. Does it do anything we haven't seen in the Thomases, the Limbos and the classics? And that's a pretty tough question to answer, because Disorder manages to be interesting, but not, I think, in a way developers Swaggerbite intended. Mechanically, we've seen it before. I think I'm safe in saying that every set of platforming skills on display is a genre staple. You've got your jumping, always a good one to remember, gravity reversal, particle current, springboards, and, most importantly, switch mechanics, dark and light mirror worlds which you toggle to tackle obstacles. Beyond interesting visual effects and some all-important story points which I'll come to, the switch mechanics don't come into their own until the trailing end of World 3 of 4, when Disorder stops introducing basic mechanics and starts combining particle streams and death cannons into some vicious, inventive puzzles. Most of it, however, is non-threatening. World 4 is bonkers, and that's probably the only one that's going to test experienced players as a result. That said, the bugs present a challenge, notably a range of platforms which are reachable, but don't come equipped with collision detection, leading to a restart when I ended up a foot from my objective, but trapped inside a rock face, just waiting to fossilise. Perhaps more annoying was the transition to the final level, which freaked out about 5 times, leaving the camera fixed while you wander off screen into the whiteness like a 2D Lawrence Oates. Maybe that one was too specific. But bugs aside, it's competent bread and butter platforming. Meat Boy completionists won't be stretched, Limbo fans won't be enchanted, but it gets the job done. Where Disorder runs into trouble, and where it gets interesting, is in marrying the platformer to the fresh story it tries to tell. Disorder takes on mental illness, and you might well ask how Swaggerbite marry that to jumping. I warn you, dear viewer, things might get heavy up in here. You play as a young adult man with an unspecified disorder. Really, I think they've cast the net wide and incorporated a number of hallmarks of the more common mental illnesses. Depression is certainly one, anxiety, perhaps autism, and more than a little psychosis. That makes it quite hard to separate what is actually happening from your character's interpretation of what's happening. But I choose to take it at face value and say that the journey is about coming to terms with the loss of your younger brother through the lens of somebody who struggles with these problems. The aim is to provide some insight for people who haven't experienced these issues as to the mindset of those who do, by assembling a complete first-person account of the journey you're on as you progress through the game. The writing itself is wonderfully robust, accurate, engaging, and bleakly amusing throughout, just rarely slipping into cliched existentialism. If you've read The Curious Incident of the Dog in the Nighttime, the tone is bang on. More importantly, and speaking from some experience, it authentically records the common thought processes of the depressed and the anxious, repeating motifs or triggers in the marbles which reveal the story, the fixation on peculiar thoughts, and of course, the stark duality of the world, a black and whiteness where others see colour. That last point is regrettably one of the few instances in which Swaggerbite managed to reconcile quality writing with the platforming itself. Light and dark, two absolute perceptions of the world. It's clever, but as established, it's been done before. There was one other instance of really smart game design, enticing explorers into an empty cave as the story in the background yaks about how some things don't need to have meaning. But for anyone who hasn't experienced a mental illness, who won't immediately empathise with that yakking, Disorder is an interesting story on a standard platformer. Thomas Was Alone is a game about squares jumping, so really it would be weird to be anything but a platformer, although I guess a dating sim could work. Disorder is a story and a platformer, separate and apart, and as I played, I never felt as if I was playing mental illness. Indeed, I felt distant from it, going through the motions of the platformer while listening to someone else's story. Interesting without being insightful. And here we have a paradox. Disorder is an average game about mental illness. It's average because it fails to marry theme and mechanics. They are separate. Two absolutes instead of a spectrum. Black and white. And that uninspiring detachment, that feeling of divorce from the events you're part of, well, that's depression. Bit of a somber one today. I do hope you'll forgive me and see your way into sharing it around anyway. I will be back next week with another review, and in the meantime, I'm working on another anthropological study. Excitement. See you next time.